Welcome to episode 6 of Killer Stories. I'm your host, Bobbie Holmes. I just wanted to thank all of my listeners for returning each week to hear my true crime stories. If you like what you're hearing, would you kindly take a minute and leave me a rating and review wherever you listen, or on my Facebook page at Killer Stories Podcast. I know Apple Podcasts you can leave ratings and reviews, but for some reason Spotify doesn't have that option for podcast, which is a bummer. But anyways, just help a girl out. It really helps my podcast grow to have more listener interaction. So thanks in advance. This week, I have 2 listener story suggestions to share with you. I'm really enjoying you guys writing in. It's fun digging into cases I've never heard before. The first story is about rapist and murderer Lawrence Bernard Singleton. I want to start by talking a little bit about the victim, Mary Vincent. Born and raised in Las Vegas, Nevada, she had a rough relationship with her parents and ended up running away when she was just 15 years old. Mary spent the summer living in her boyfriend's car. She didn't have a vehicle, but she was able to travel by hitchhiking. She traveled across states this way when she would visit her grandfather in Corona, California. I know hitchhiking was common in this era, but the year is now 1978, and we've already known of many murders that have happened to people who have gotten into cars with strangers, yet people continue to do it. Please, I beg of you, never hitchhike. Stranger danger, just don't do it. I mean, everyone has a smartphone now. Just call an Uber. Mary Vincent is standing on the side of the road with her thumb out, trying to hitch a ride from Berkeley to Corona, California. Why does that sound familiar? Oh yeah, because that is where just 6 years earlier, Ed Kemper picked up the first 2 victims of his co-ed killings. Anyways, Larry Singleton sees Mary hitching a ride and stops. She tells him she needs to get to Corona. Larry comments that he is headed the opposite direction but would help her out and take her where she needed to go. Which, to me, seems strange off the bat. It's not like it's around the corner. This is 419 miles away. That's 6.5 hours one way. Another red flag, Larry drove what I literally call a rape van. You know, those big white vans without any back windows. It's like solid in the back and the only windows are the passenger and driver's side doors. Yeah, so God only knows what happens in the back of those things, but this is what Larry picked Mary up in. Mary hops into the passenger seat and lights up a cigarette, and as she does that, she sneezes. And Larry reaches over to touch her with the back of his hand, like how your mother does when she's checking you for a fever. And as he reaches for her, Mary pulls away from him. Nope, don't effing touch me. I would be like, no thanks, and jump out of the car. She was on alert after that, but he kept to himself for quite a while, and she was relaxed enough to fall asleep. But when she woke up, she realized something wasn't right. He was driving in the wrong direction, back towards Nevada. Scared, confused, and angry, she looks around and found a sharp stick next to her in the car. She grabs it and points it at Larry, demanding him to turn back around. He convinced her that he meant no harm and that he made an honest mistake. I can't stress this enough. Go with your gut, guys. When you feel something is wrong, it usually is. Don't be afraid to make a scene if you feel unsafe. My favorite true crime podcast, Crime Junkie, their motto is actually be weird, be rude, stay alive. And it's the truth. Singleton made a stop so the 2 could use the bathroom and stretch their legs. He was waiting for the right moment. When Mary bent down to tie her shoe, he hit her over the head with a sledgehammer. Then he dropped his pants and forced her to perform oral sex on him. He said he would kill her if she didn't. Then he took her to the back of the rape van, where he continued to rape her. He said if she wanted to stay alive, she shouldn't fight him or try to scream. Then Larry tied Mary's hands behind her back and began driving. The next time he stopped, he untied her and forced her to drink a mystery alcohol from an unmarked plastic jug. Mary was in and out of consciousness while Singleton raped her over and over. When she finally came to, Larry was still there beside her. Mary hysterically begged for him to set her free. Singleton said, "Set you free? I'll set you free." And he walks away and returns carrying a hatchet. He uses the hatchet to cut off both of her arms just below the elbow. Mary was bleeding profusely from her forearms. Singleton picked her up and threw her down a 30-foot cliff and yelled down to her, "There, now you're free." He assumed she was near death and left her there to die, but he underestimated the determination of 15-year-old Mary Vincent to stay alive. She was naked and bleeding out, but managed to pick herself up. Mary was smart enough to know that she needed to do something to slow down the bleeding or she was going to die. She did something I don't think I would have thought of. She submerged what was left of her arms into mud, and this helped suppress the bleeding. Mary was somehow able to pull herself back up the 30-foot cliff she was just thrown down. Adrenaline must have been pumping hard because then she walked over 3 miles. The whole time she held her arms up in the air to help slow the bleeding from her forearms. The first car to come across Mary was frightened at the sight of this girl, naked, dirty, bloody, and missing her arms. They sped away. I can imagine that being a pretty scary sight. Nowadays, you can just safely call 911 from your car. But thankfully, another car approached and they stopped to help her. They wrapped her up in sheets they had in the car and drove to the nearest location for help, which happened to be an airport. There, they called her an ambulance. Mary was able to describe her attacker to a T. A very detailed sketch was drawn, and it didn't take police long to recognize it as Lawrence Singleton. Singleton denies all actions of rape and mutilation. He says he did pick her up, but she was a prostitute. He actually had the balls to call her a $10 a night whore. Mary Vincent had 2 prosthetic arms made. The forearms were made of wood, and then she had hooks for hands. I'll post a picture for you guys on my Facebook and Instagram pages. This girl is my hero, seriously. She's there posing with her prosthetics and just smiling from ear to ear. 6 months afterwards, she bravely stood before a jury and calmly described what happened during her attack. The kidnapping, the rape, the mutilation, and how Larry left her to die. He was convicted of all charges, including attempted murder. Larry was sentenced to 14 years in prison. The judge said, quote, "If I had the power, I would send him to prison for the rest of his life," end quote. And that judge is right. Sick people like this should be locked up for life. On the way out of the courtroom, Larry whispered to Mary, "I'll finish the job if it takes me the rest of my life." Mary lived in fear every day of her life. She struggled with school, her home life, relationships. Depression and anxiety from the trauma of her attack took over. On top of that, he only served 8 years of his prison sentence. He was released on good behavior. I don't care how good he was in there, that doesn't mean cut his sentencing in half. Who decides this early release shit anyways? I know it wasn't the original judge from this case. After his release, Larry was not welcomed back into society. There were constant picketing and protests everywhere he went. In Rodeo, California, police had to take Larry to a hotel with armed guards because of the 500 local protesters following him around. Everywhere he went, protesters followed. He moved into an apartment in Contra Costa, California. 400 residents surrounded the building in protest of this monster living in their community. Police had to escort him out of the building wearing a bulletproof vest. For the rest of his parole, he had to live in a trailer on the San Quentin State Prison grounds with armed guards. In 1981, the outrage surrounding Larry's early release from prison resulted in the Singleton Bill. A person convicted of crimes involving torture are no longer allowed to be released on early parole. They must serve their entire sentence of 25 to life. My vote is life in prison. After finishing his parole, Larry Singleton moves back to his home state of Florida. I swear all the crimes I've talked about so far have been in California or Florida. He was met with the same warm welcoming there. Floridians were pissed that this rapist and attempted murderer was running free. No one in the area felt safe. Colonel Cal Henderson reported, quote, "At the current time, unless he violates another law, there's absolutely nothing we can do," end quote. I understand this is out of his hands, but really, we just need to wait for him to commit another crime? Multiple business owners came together to offer Singleton money to leave, including a one-way plane ticket out of Florida and the first 6 months of rent and utilities wherever he wants to go. But Larry stayed put in Florida. In 1997, Larry's neighbor called the police with a noise complaint. He said it sounded like someone was being assaulted inside Larry's home. When the police arrived, they found Larry Singleton covered in blood, standing next to the lifeless body of Roxanne Hayes. Roxanne was there as a sex worker, but that does not make her disposable. She was more than that. She was a mother of 3, and Singleton repeatedly stabbed her in the torso until she bled to death. Unfortunately, we had to wait for him to commit another crime before he could be put away where he belongs. Mary Vincent traveled to Florida to testify against Singleton in the murder trial for Roxanne Hayes. Larry was convicted and put on death row, but he died of cancer in 2001. After his death, Mary was finally able to get some closure. She had control over her depression and started a family. She had 2 little boys. Even with her handicap, she became a pretty successful artist. She had sketches and paintings worth over $2,000 apiece. I'm so happy she fought for her life that day. If she didn't, Singleton may have gone on to kill more girls without being caught. He killed one too many because of a flawed judicial system. Hopefully the Singleton bill has helped keep these creeps behind bars. Before I jump into my second story, I wanted to take a short break to tell you about the burst brush. You heard me mention last episode that I am a dental hygienist by day and podcaster by night, but I'm also a Burst ambassador, and I'm here to share my discount code with you. Burst is an electric toothbrush that uses sonic vibrations. It has the same technology as the big brand toothbrushes without the big price tag. My favorite part is the extra soft charcoal-infused bristles. The charcoal absorbs impurities, helping to whiten while you brush. This brush comes in black, white, and rose gold. You can save $20 on each brush using the code B as in boy, S as in Sam, D as in dog, AEA at checkout. You'll get a new brush head sent every 3 months, so you don't even have to think about it. The code will discount all items in your cart. Just visit burstoralcare.com and use the promo code BSDAEA at checkout. And I'll also leave the website and the promo code in the show notes. Okay, enough about oral health. Let's jump back into my second story. October 22nd, 2013. Danvers High School, which is near Boston, Massachusetts. 2 students stayed after school for some help from a popular math teacher, 24-year-old Colleen Ritzer. One female student was avidly asking questions and stayed late for a little tutoring session. The second student, Philip Chism, sat at his desk doodling. Everyone was getting ready to leave for the day, and somehow a conversation started where Colleen mentioned the word Tennessee. Philip Chism became visibly angry and started talking to himself. Once Ms. Ritzer realized this, she immediately changed the subject. She was unaware, but Philip just recently moved to the area from Tennessee. He was happy there, but his parents were going through a rough divorce, and he was very unhappy to be living here in Massachusetts. Before leaving the school that day, Colleen Ritzer went into the restroom. A moment after she enters the restroom, you see Philip Chism exiting her classroom. He's checking his pockets and pacing back and forth. Then he flips up his hood and puts on latex gloves before entering the bathroom. Philip, who is 14 years old, comes up behind Colleen and slashes her throat with a box cutter. This initial cut doesn't kill Colleen. Over the next 11 minutes, Philip strangles, rapes, and stabs Colleen in the neck 16 times. That is when another student enters the bathroom and sees clothes lying on the floor. She immediately runs out, thinking she walked in on someone changing or a couple of teens in there having sex after school. But little did she know, her math teacher was being assaulted by a fellow student. Video cameras then show Philip leaving the bathroom and returning with a fresh change of clothes and rolling a recycling bin. Then, wearing a ski mask, he used that bin to transfer Colleen through the school and outside into the woods. He was interrupted in the bathroom and he wasn't finished with her. You can watch all of this video surveillance from the hallway on YouTube, and it's chilling. In the woods, Philip spent 25 minutes brutally raping Colleen using a tree branch. He left her naked from the waist down, posed her in a sexual position, and left a handwritten note that said, "I hate you all," next to her. Philip stole her purse and used her credit card to buy a movie ticket that evening. Afterward, he didn't go home. His parents called the police and reported Philip missing. Colleen was also reported missing, but she was 24 years old and single. She could be doing her own thing and just didn't let anyone else know her plans. Police found Philip Chism hours later walking down a busy road. They searched him and found the box cutter, Ritzer's credit cards, ID, and a pair of women's underwear in his backpack. They asked whose blood was on the box cutter, and he said, "It's the girls." The cleaning crew for the high school only spoke Spanish. They reported that there was blood in the bathroom, but somehow must have gotten lost in translation, and they were told to just clean it up. Unfortunately, they cleaned a crime scene, but luckily, blood is not that easy to get rid of, and there were traces left behind that they could link to Colleen Ritzer. Colleen's body was found in the woods. Since Philip was found with her belongings, he was interviewed and confessed to his crimes. He said, "After she insulted me, I became the teacher." He claims that she was insulting him using the trigger word Tennessee, and of course she had no idea that that word was a no-no in the vocabulary of Philip Chism. I mean, seriously, it's a state and you're in school. Who knew? But that can't be true. He didn't just hear the word Tennessee and snap. He was supposed to have soccer practice after school that day, but he did not pack his soccer clothes. Instead, he packed a ski mask, gloves, a change of clothes, and a box cutter. He 100% planned this assault. Even though in his interview with police he admitted to his crimes, he pled not guilty. Chism's attorney tried for an insanity case, which is hard to win in Massachusetts, and he hadn't had any prior diagnosis of mental illness. Everyone said he was a well-behaved kid who excelled in sports. His mother said he had a hard time with their divorce, but didn't report any other abnormal behavior. Some of his soccer teammates did say they noticed a recent change in his behavior, like lack of emotion when scoring a goal. He was less outgoing and more quiet and reserved than usual. My thought is, and hopefully not pissing anyone off by saying this, but don't you have to be mentally ill to do something like this? I mean, whether he's sane or insane, there's something wrong. People don't just go raping and murdering their teachers after school in the bathroom. Claiming insanity should not be a get-out-of-jail-free card. Philip Chism was charged with rape, armed robbery, and first-degree murder. The armed robbery charge was because he took her purse and used her credit card. He should have been charged with a second count of rape, a charge called unnatural rape, as if there is anything natural about rape, but I guess it pertains to an object being used, in this case, the tree branch in the woods. The charge for unnatural rape was dropped because the autopsy was unable to tell for sure if Colleen died from asphyxiation or stabbing, and when she died. Did she die in the bathroom or in the woods? If she was raped after she was already dead, then apparently that isn't rape. Once a person is dead, you can just do whatever you please to them and it doesn't count? That's disgusting. Chism was charged as an adult and sentenced to life in prison with a chance for parole in 25 years. Let's hope that doesn't happen. I don't want to see the name Philip Chism in the news ever again. As I was doing this research, I came across Colleen's Twitter account. It's still active, and it's so sad to read her last posts. Homework assignments and motivational words for her students. You can tell she just loved being a teacher. She posted quirky math-related things. This tragedy happened right before Halloween. She had just posted a picture of her jack-o'-lantern with the pi symbol carved into it. In honor of her passion and to help create her legacy, Colleen's family started a scholarship for a senior graduating each year from Danvers High School in her name. Today's stories were crazy. I know hitchhiking isn't safe, and you'll never find me doing that. But now I feel like I'll be looking over my shoulder every time I enter a restroom. Time to go back to carrying around my pointy-eared pit bull keychain. It's basically like a plastic version of sharp brass knuckles. A couple of years ago, I visited New York City with my mom and my sister, and I literally carried it around in my hand, ready to puncture a jugular if necessary. You can never be too safe. You can find my source information for today's episode in the show notes. Make sure you like and follow Killer Stories wherever you listen so that you never miss a new episode. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Killer Stories Podcast. I'll be jumping on the Facebook page to start a discussion about today's episode if you want to chat about it. Email me any new story suggestions to KillerStoriesPodcast@gmail.com. Until next time, these were 2 killer stories.